Well, good evening, everybody. I thought we'd start a new series, maybe. We'll see how this goes, of Pajama Medical. And so, as you can see, I have the pajamas, and we're going to talk about a pulse oximeter and pulse oximetry, particularly as it relates to mountainous areas. The reason is because I'm reading up on things like blood pressure and things like this, and I read up on vital signs. And the pulse oximeter gives a measurement of the saturation of oxygen in your blood. So basically, what it's doing is it's estimating the number of red blood cells that you have in your blood, which gives you the oxygen saturation or the SpO2 reading. Pulse oximeter is also called pulse ox. And what is it? Well, you can see I'll have a picture on the cover, and it's generally that little crazy thing they clip on your finger. So when you go to a hospital, you get this little thing clipped on your finger. Generally, that's a pulse oximeter, but it might be registering your pulse as well. So it's probably registering your saturation of your red blood cells in your blood to give you a oxygen saturation estimate, or it could be also registering your pulse. So anyway, what is it? Well, it's a non-invasive medical device, and non-invasive means it doesn't invade your body. It uses red and infrared light to basically kind of peer in and estimate the red blood cells. I'm not going to get into the technical aspects of that because I have a lot to talk about. But anyway, there are 4 vital signs. If they say we're going to take your vitals or vital signs, and this is something typically done in medicine whenever, so it's a base that they want to get, a base reading. So there are 4 different vital signs: your temperature, your pulse, your respirations, your blood pressure. The pulse oximetry reading is often called the 5th vital. Sometimes it's called that. So in addition to temp, pulse, respiration, and blood pressure, they also sometimes want to have the saturation of oxygen in your blood, particularly if you're at altitude or in a mountainous state or up on Mount Everest, which, by the way, it is very commonly used up there. But they say never to just use the measurement from this. Always see how you feel, what you have, if you have symptoms, etc. So basically, at sea level, 95% to 100% on the pulse ox is considered normal. And if you fall below 90 at sea level, you're kind of in trouble and you need some attention. However, if you go up in altitude, so for instance, I lived in Colorado and I lived in the mountains. I lived at about somewhere between 7,500 and 8,000 feet above sea level. And that's a long ways above sea level. And anyway, what happens when you go up to that kind of altitude, your blood oxygen saturation is going to dip. So you could even go down to, say, 85% to 93%. And if you've just come to the mountains and you've just come to altitude and they were to measure that and get that reading, probably if it's your first day or so, nobody's going to panic. However, if you develop symptoms, respiratory symptoms or intense headaches or something like that, somebody's going to panic. But anyway, within about 4 days or so, it should begin to normalize or at least get better, because at that time your body's going to start to acclimatize. They call it acclimatization, or acclimatize to the altitude. And at that time you will start to make more red blood cells to compensate for less red blood cells. Let's see. So at altitude about 5,000 to 10,000 feet, in your first, let's say, 4 days up there, you might have readings from 85% to 93%. But remember, anything below 90% at sea level is going to be considered probably an emergency. And then as you go further up, above 10,000 feet, well, that also, you will see even more dip with that. And to compensate for less oxygen saturation, your heart rate and your respiratory rate will spike, in other words, go up, until you begin to acclimatize. That's why they say if you're going to go up in altitude, the best thing is to do it slowly and stay partway up for a night or two, and so that you do acclimatize. Now, I can tell you that at altitude, I had trouble acclimatizing, and I don't know that I ever fully did. I had a lot of physical issues and problems. At altitude, this is where they found a lot of my cardiovascular problems. This is where the back problems kind of started, although it didn't get really serious for a long time. But anyway, and I don't know if the altitude had anything to do with that or not, but I'm guessing it might have. And I know I saw a doctor he wasn't my regular doctor, it was sort of an interim doctor, but I saw him in Colorado Springs, and he said he used to also live at altitude, but he said after you live at altitude for a little bit, even after you acclimatize, your labs will start to be off, and many people develop problems and have to actually go down. So, two problems you can develop that are very serious if you go up, like say if you're trying to go up a mountain, or you don't even have to go, you don't have to be a mountaineer to have this happen. Some ski resorts are high enough that people have these problems skiing. But two things that you can get are called HACE and HAPE. And HACE is high altitude cerebral edema, and HAPE is high altitude pulmonary edema. Both of these are very serious conditions. HACE, high altitude cerebral edema, what does that mean? Cerebral means your brain, edema means swelling. Your brain swells, and that is not a good thing. So if that begins, you have a problem. And if that starts, you need to start to descend to take care of it. There's something else called HAPE, which is high altitude pulmonary edema. And this is where there is inflammation and fluid collecting in your lungs. And generally you will have symptoms such as a cough, shortness of breath, especially a gurgling cough, and it can get worse very fast and unexpectedly, and it can be fatal. And you need to take care of it if that starts. It said it generally will start between the second and fourth night at altitude, above 8,000 feet. Basically. And so we lived at 7,500 to 8,000 feet. We were almost at a level where we could have had those problems. So anyway, one thing that they do say is that the pulse ox is just it's a measurement, and it's a significant measurement, but also you have to take into consideration how you feel, what symptoms you have, if you have symptoms, if you do not have symptoms. And so you need like a full picture of what's going on, not just the reading. Generally, it clips onto it. You'll see a picture of it on my cover. Generally, it clips on a fingertip. It's that pesky thing they always put on my finger if I go to the ER, and then they tell me, "Oh, go get us a urine sample," and you're going, "Well, what do I do with this thing?" And or you try to move around and there's this thing in the way all the time. I hate it, but that's generally what it is. And so I think that's about all I have to say about that. But it's used here. It's used at sea level, flatlanders, but it's also used it's used extensively in places like Colorado. It was considered a very important measurement in Colorado. Here it's kind of like, well, kind of look at it, and if it's okay, it's fine, but it was something that they really needed to see in Colorado because we were at high altitude, and particularly if we went even further up. So Denver's called the Mile High City. Well, Mile High is nothing. So even Colorado Springs is higher than Denver. And people think, oh, the Mile High City, we're up here in altitude. Oh no, it gets further up. And the tallest mountains, some of the tallest mountains in Colorado are called 14ers because they're at about 14,000 feet. But think of this. Mount Everest is about 30,000 feet. So the highest mountain in Colorado, if you've been to Colorado or if you've seen pictures, they're up there. And it's about 14,000 feet. And then Mount Everest is about 30,000. Think about it. Well, I hope you enjoyed this little talk on the pulse ox or pulse oximetry. Pulse oximeter, and I think I might start a series of Pajama Medical, and we'll just talk about medical stuff every once in a while. Thank you.